Just advise members, devices should be put on mute by pressing FN, then F8 keys. Screens can be viewed by the cameras in the room, and the devices should only be used for committee business during the meeting. When members refer to a specific page number in the pack, they should refer to the page number at the top of the page. And when a submission has been numbered by the witness, the member should also refer to this to avoid confusing the witness. And I would ask anyone in the public gallery and the committee to ensure that all other electronic devices are switched off. I would also invite members to declare any interests which are relevant to issues being discussed at today's meeting. And in relation to apologies, there's an apology from the Chair and from Fran McCann. Does anybody else have other apologies? Apology from Sally. Thank you. Moving on, draft minutes from the 5th of March are page 3 of members' tabled items folder. And I would ask members of the content of the minutes from the 5th of March as drafted. In relation to chairperson's business, the chairperson, Clark, met informally with the Lisburn Carers Forum on Tuesday to hear some of the issues encountered by lifelong carers. There will be a paper coming back from that particular meeting. Moving on to matters arising, I would refer members to page 8 of their meeting packs. The Department has written the committee in response to a request for an update on the landlord registration scheme. The Department has provided an update and details on how it will manage the registration scheme going forward. I wish to point out that officials are here next week to brief the committee in the private rented sector and should be able to answer additional queries. Alternatively, the committee can schedule a briefing after the Easter recess period as the forward work programme is busy the remaining 2 weeks of this session. So, the committee have any views? Do members have any views on that? Are people happy enough to schedule a briefing after the Easter recess period?
Yep.
Thank you. I would remind members that the committee's report on phase 2 of the inquiry is due to be published tomorrow. The report will be available on the committee's website and hard copies will be delivered to members' offices once they are received. I would also point out it's normal procedure to ensure the Minister is provided with a copy of the report at least 3 working days before public issue. However, the Department has raised concerns that the Minister received a copy 2 working days before public issue. I would advise the committee that this was due to last-minute changes and sign-off for the typesetters before sending the report to the printers. I would also wish to note that a manuscript copy has been available in the business office since the 20th of February for the Minister or any MLA to view. And in relation to press release or otherwise, the Assembly Communications have proposed that a media operations release would be more appropriate than a press release. So I just ask members' views on that.
Is a media operation notice?
It's just a very short statement indicating to the media outlets that the committee has published its report on phase 2 of its inquiry.
So have members any comments or observations to make on that?
What happens, my voice is away, Chairman, what happens then in terms of the debate?
Chair, the committee has agreed that there wouldn't be a debate on phase 2.
Right. So, just table it, move on?
Move on.
Right. That's a good decision. What then, once we get to subsequent phases?
Well, phase 3 is an entirely different matter. It's for the committee to decide whether there should be a debate on that also.
How do you mean also?
Also, that's a decision for the committee to determine, to take, whether there would be a debate on the phase 3 report or whether there won't be a debate on the phase 3 report.
Once we finalise phase 3 report, we can decide what we do.
Well, the committee decided there wouldn't be a debate on phase 2, so they can decide if
There wouldn't be a suggestion, Chairman, that we wouldn't have a debate on the entirety of the report, I hope.
Well, it's obviously up to the committee.
We've had a debate in phase 1.
Yeah, we did, yes.
Yes.
Which was a partial phase of the report,
There was a decision by the committee in phase 2 not to debate that.
which was another partial.
But obviously,
Phase 3, there wouldn't be an intention of having phase 4.
Never know.
hopefully not.
Well, I would like to think not. So, phase 3, we would take a decision which I presume is a wrap-up decision.
Presumably.
But nobody would be seriously suggesting that we wouldn't debate that.
Certainly at this point, I would.
Unless you are.
I certainly am not, as well you know, Ryan, and everybody else knows as well. We need to get this into the chamber. Okay.
I think you've been fairly consistent on that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if members are content, we can move on. No doubt that will be discussed in relation to phase 3 and any final report that emerges. The next item on the agenda is the regeneration bill.
Well, just before we
Sorry.
go off the minutes, is there any update on Mr. Roundtree and Rinmore?
We did follow up Mr. Roundtree, but again, the end of the week would be.
Sorry?
At the end of the week, he said he would get us the response.
End of this week?
End of this week.
That's by tomorrow then.
Are members content? Go on. Right, the next item is the regeneration bill, and it's a briefing from NILGA. The following representatives from NILGA are here to brief the committee on the regeneration bill. I would ask Councillor Dermot Nicholl from Limavady Borough Council and Karen Smith, Head of Policy of NILGA. And I would refer members to page 15 of their meeting packs. And Beckham, Dermot and Karen, thanks very much for coming. And if you want to go ahead, do the briefing, and then members may want to ask questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank the committee for giving us this opportunity to give evidence here today. This is a hugely challenging time for the government, the members and officers and councils, and the fact may have limited the number of responses the committee received about this bill. This does not mean that councils do not view the bill as critically important. The regeneration bill is the last major piece of the jigsaw required by councils to bring to life to the executive's vision for strong local government and to fully implement this tranche of local government reform within the wider review of public administration. Regeneration, particularly when combined with our new responsibilities for community planning, development planning and economic development, will begin to drive the change so badly needed by our citizens, and will enable councils to improve the social, economic and environmental well-being of our new council areas. NILGA welcomes this bill and is keen to see its efficient passage through the Assembly mechanisms. However, there are a number of issues that we need to highlight to the committee and to ensure that the best version of this legislation is what is finally enacted.
Chair, we've already provided the committee with a detailed paper and a synopsis of key issues, and they can be broadly summarised into 3 groups. The first of these is the potential for the Department to exert an unnecessarily high level of control over councils or to over-interfere in council activity. Until now, the parent department for councils has been the Department for Environment, which has historically held powers of intervention over councils. These powers are only used as powers of last resort, and, for example, the last example we're aware of was during the Ulster Says No campaign in the late 80s following the signing of the Anglo-Irish Agreement. It's very extreme situations that happens. The Local Government Northern Ireland Act 2014 and related acts, particularly the Planning Act and this bill, have introduced a more complex system of powers of intervention, and NILGA is deeply concerned that there's potential for greater and more frequent interference in the activities of councils, which would counter the Executive's intent to develop strong local government. It's vital that with councils being given greater powers and responsibilities, that they are given the necessary freedom to use them without being tied up in bureaucracy or controlled by departments. This is about devolution of decision-making to councils in line with the European Charter of Local Self-Government, and in the context of the Regeneration Bill, this is particularly important when considering clauses 5, 6, 9 and 13. Councils, in partnership with departments, will be developing a new performance management and improvement system linked to community planning and the programme for government. But this will take at least a year to bed in and develop. We're keen that in the interim, a light touch approach is taken by departments as new partnership working relationships develop. The second issue is potential implementation difficulties arising from the current fiscal environment. Another of the initial principles on which the reform of local government was based was that of ensuring the changes to the system and transfers of function were rates neutral to the ratepayer. Local government has been doing all it can to ensure that this continues to be the case, although the situation has been complicated by rates differentials between merging council areas and also the recent revaluation of the non-domestic rate. We are grateful to the Finance Minister for providing support to assist those councils with rates figures particularly badly impacted by reform, and to his officials for developing appropriate financial mechanisms to support the transfers. The delay in the Regeneration Bill, although to some degree unavoidable, has complicated this picture further. This, in tandem with the current budgetary situation, has led to real fear in councils that an acceptable budget will not follow the transfer of this function as previously agreed. This fear has now become reality, with letters received by councils yesterday and notifying them of a £10 million or 15% cut in the budget, transferring from DSD, additional to the 4% cut to the budget initially intended to be passed to councils in this year. Thus, councils are faced with an almost 20% cut in what they originally hoped to receive from DSD. This is in direct contrast with other departments, such as DOE in the case of planning, who transferred ring-fenced budgets and did not apply government cuts to monies coming across to councils. We are extremely alarmed by the inconsistency in policy being applied across departments, and we would urge the committee to ask the Minister and his department to rethink their application of cuts to councils. NILGA would emphasise the opposition within local government to any further cuts being applied to regeneration budgets, and our expectation that the figure agreed for 2015-16 is reflected in the 2016-17 budgets. Additionally, we would again draw the committee's attention to Clause 5 and Section 2 of Clause 5, as there is a great deal of concern within the sector that the department can direct a council to prepare a development scheme for an area with no reference to the provision of adequate financial provision for such a scheme. NILGA is also aware that councils in the West are particularly concerned at what they see as disadvantaging and imbalance in comparison with eastern councils, and we would encourage the committee to explore this issue. The third key issue is examination of aspects of the bill which were removed. NILGA accepts that it was expedient to remove some aspects that the bill had been initially intended to cover, but we would encourage the committee to take some time to fully explore these issues, why they were removed and whether or not they should be reinstated. It's noted that some of the original proposals were not particularly contentious in the view of local government and were related to existing council operation. We would value committee consideration of issues surrounding housing on fitness, houses in multiple occupation and energy efficiency, and we are extremely keen to highlight the potential need for reintroduction of a clause to provide a revised statutory footing for the Housing Council. NILGA would seek to assure the committee that should these provisions be restored, councils will put in place vigorous and robust governance arrangements to ensure services are delivered fairly whilst targeting those in greatest need. We would again highlight the new requirements being put in place in relation to council performance improvement and audit. Last but not least, we would highlight that current membership of the Housing Council is 1 member per council as per the Housing Northern Ireland Order 1981. The 11 councils are holding their first AGMs in March. Several have already taken place. And it is our understanding that a number of them are appointing on a 1-person per council basis, whereas the initial draft of the bill had suggested 2 members from each of the 11 councils. In discussion with Housing Council members, we understand that their view was that a membership of 22 would enable a more inclusive spread of parties within the new council membership. NILGA would encourage the committee to clarify the needs of the Housing Council and the intent of the Minister in this regard, particularly since the political board members of the Housing Executive are currently drawn from the wider Housing Council membership. Thank you for listening. We're happy to take any questions. If there are any queries we can't answer today, we'll note the question and come back to you with answers as quickly as possible.
Thanks very much, Dave. Just have a couple of questions before we bring in members. Clause 7 deals with the acquisition of land by councils for planning purposes. And you have mentioned that there's no provision to address concerns that have been raised in relation to land ownership. and resulting perceived profits or losses. Could you provide a bit more information about the concerns that you've raised?
I think this was in response to conversations we've been following within the committee and within the Assembly, and we understand that some of the members had raised issues where, you know, where ownership changes and sort of costs and benefits that apply to that. We don't have any particular view, is my understanding, on what should go into the bill if the committee wanted to address that particular situation. And we're just pointing out that actually the bill at the moment doesn't provide a provision to deal with that issue.
Thank you. You've already addressed some of this in your presentation, where NILGA appears to have a number of concerns around the level of control retained by the department, and you've talked about it as a partnership. From your point of view, where do you think the decision power should actually lie? Should it be in a joint, or should the department retain overall?
Chair, I think that in the experience of local government where they've been largely dealing with DOE in the past, there are obviously issues we don't agree with DOE on, but there is a relationship there that has developed over many years where we can negotiate with them and work in partnership with them to a large extent. That relationship has expanded via the Local Government Act to the Partnership Panel, where the ministers, the executive ministers, are working closely with representatives from councils on issues of strategic importance. And that is providing political leadership for that partnership relationship. I think practically and operationally, we need to develop a more effective partnership relationship with DOE, with DSD, particularly on regeneration issues, to make sure that we're all working in the same direction. Everybody's looking for the same outcomes, and it's more a case of what we would like to do is move within the programme for government to a more outcomes-focused approach to everybody's work, so that we're not at sixes and sevens where we're trying to arrange or make arrangements or provide schemes at local level.
That's fine, thank you. Just bring in members. Mr. Allister.
Yeah, I just want to understand, in your presentation today, is this the product of a considered view by NILGA, where all the council representatives have actually considered the bill, reported back on the views of their own councils, or is it something short of that?
Do you want me to take this? Chair, through you, the policy that was developed, the response that was developed that came to the committee was based on responses that have previously been provided. This is building on an ongoing discussion within local government. It's been an evolving process. In relation to issues that have developed yesterday, for example, in relation to the letters that were received by councils, I have been in contact with all the chief executives since the letter was received, and have received communications with two of the councils to highlight their, actually 3 of the councils that have highlighted their concern with the change to the funding arrangements. So it's hard to pinpoint a particular response that has come back from a particular council at any point in time, because it has been an evolving situation. I have papers with me where we have looked at consultations from the department in 2013, the Deloitte paper in 2014.
But that was all in the original bill.
Yes, yeah. But we know that the changes to the bill have, you know, there's been a number of issues that have been taken out. And we know that you've received a communication, particularly from Mid and East Antrim Council, that would support the reintroduction of those functions, without wanting to express a view that there's particular things that should come in. I think we have requested the committee to just look at the issue again.
I suppose what I'm asking is, has there been an up-to-date discussion within NILGA and its councillor representatives on the bill as it now stands?
The evidence that we provided to the regeneration, on the regeneration bill that was provided to the committee for February, went to the NILGA executive on the 13th of February for consideration, and so that has gone to the NILGA executive.
Part of the reason I ask that is because I'm aware of views expressed in some councils which don't seem to be reflected in this submission. There has been some concern raised, as was raised in the Assembly, for example, as to what the definition of social need is meant to be in this bill, which isn't defined anywhere. And yet, strangely, your submission just passes over that, whereas it seems to be the fundamental starting point. If you've got a bill which talks about addressing areas of social need, but it doesn't define what would qualify as an area of social need, it's a pretty poor starting point, is it not?
That particular issue is not one that was considered by NILGA.
Well, what do you understand an area of social need to be?
I think that there are a number of different views in relation to that, and it's a political decision. Maybe Dermot?
I would suppose, from being an elected member, looking at bills to get and going forward, and like the reform of public administration is be welcomed and stuff. And I think in the general field within councils and councillors is that it is welcomed that there is powers and there is things coming over where local areas and local communities can sort of address each within their area, because not every area is the same geographically, and every mix up is different, and so there is different needs, and the local representatives in each area, what I be speaking to, feel sometimes that whilst we're getting certain things in one hand, it's been taken away in other hands, you know, because we are supposed to be more joined up and going forward and within community planning and more cohesive way of working, and sometimes, you know, that doesn't come across.
I'm not sure that addresses the point I'm trying to make. That here we have a bill supposedly giving powers to councils to deal with issues of social need, but yet spectacularly makes no effort to define what social need is. And social need is something which has been variously defined under neighbourhood renewal. It's informed by the Noble indexes. Is that your perception of what social need means here? Sure, I would have thought councils would be most anxious to nail this down and find out what, in fact, this bill means when it talks about social need, and yet there seems a total absence of any consideration of that in your submission.
Chair, I think that would probably go into the category of questions we can't answer at this particular moment in time, and we will come back to the committee as a matter of urgency on that issue.
Because in some councils I've heard it said that they really want to see a focus on the economic needs of their district. That regeneration should be about economic regeneration above everything else. And therefore we need, instead of fluffy language about social need, we need to nail that down. Is that not a view amongst many councillors?
Chair, I think that the upcoming community planning regime will answer many of those questions, and it may be that a more flexible approach to certain issues might actually be helpful. Depending on, as Councillor Nicholl has said, different areas look very different locally. So through the community planning process, in partnership, through that partnership approach, councils and their partners can look at what's necessary in local areas. And as I say, it's not something that I have specifically spoken to councils about, but it's certainly something I can look back on.
Thank you.
Is that okay for the moment?
Thanks.
Just on the community, I attended a community plan in my own area recently, and certainly the whole issue of social need and indeed economic development were two of the main issues discussed. So I think that's still very much under discussion by certainly in my own area where Newry Mourne is joining up with Down. So I would imagine in other councils that's a matter for discussion as well. Stuart?
Thank you for your submission. Just a couple of questions. First of all, when you say the NILGA executive discuss this, is that the shadow executive for the new shadow councils or the former executive of the outgoing councils?
If I could just explain, Chair, at the moment NILGA is representative of the 26 councils, but the contact we have is there's an element of continuity because quite a number of the existing NILGA executive are actually key members on the new councils as well. So NILGA is in the process of reconstituting. We have got membership now agreed by all of the 11 new councils, and we will be reconstituting the executive in the next month or two, with an AGM in June. But there is, as I say, there is an element of continuity between the two.
But the review of the 26 rather than the new.
At the executive, yes, but there is a combination of both, because we are liaising closely with the new councils, particularly the chief executive.
More importantly, and just again to go back into the discussion about the balance between terms of regeneration. Mr. Ballast made reference to the fact that some people see that primary focus of regeneration in terms of economic regeneration. Others will see the primary focus in terms of social deprivation. And how do you think that you're going to achieve a balance, or how do you think your members are going to achieve a balance in that? And would you share with me the serious concern that in considering development schemes, that there is no reference in the bill or no requirement in the bill to take account of shared space?
Chair, if you look at look back to the Local Government Act again, if you look at the requirements for community planning, the basis of community planning is the social, economic, environmental well-being of an area. And there is a balance to be struck, and that balance may look different in different areas for different purposes. I think that in relation to shared space, certainly councils have a number of responsibilities under community planning and also under the TBUC document that we need to incorporate into the guidance for community planning, and actually look at how we do development planning as a result of that, because obviously community planning is the overarching policy that's going to be for the new councils. We have recently been speaking to the OFM-DFM committee about good relations and how to build those issues into community planning and development planning. And the guidance document that should be coming out to councils very soon, the consultation closed on the 9th of March, will incorporate fully the requirements on councils in relation to those issues.
And just finally, Chair, Clause 11 gives you the right to extinguish rights of way, a right which councils already have, but just failed either because of the inadequacy of the legislation, or failed because local government was incapable of dealing with the matter. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that the new power that we've got to extinguish rights of way will actually work this time?
As we said in our response, we are slightly concerned about that disability and physical accessibility issues have been taken into account in relation to rights of way. I think a lot of what's in the bill will become much more clear whenever it comes to subordinate legislation and guidance. But having the principle in there as in the clause is useful, and we can work that out with the department.
You know, once again, councils will recognise the balance between the desire to sustain rights of way and the complaints of communities because of antisocial behaviour and the need to have them closed. But do you think this power will actually stop you being moribund and actually allow you to make decisions?
Certainly, there's an ability to make decisions, and I think it will help us make decisions. But I think that the requirement now with councils to actively engage more with their communities through, again, community planning and also the community involvement aspects of the development plans system will actually allow for that more bottom-up approach. Now, I think that the community will need to, the capacity of the community it will need to be developed, and we're working with various funding community sector bodies to make sure that happens, to make sure that we can manage expectations within the whole process. But it will be for local agreement.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, a lot of this things that I say I keep sort of saying about this community plan thing, because at the end of the day, that's what a lot of this is about moving forward, and it's about, you know, communities. So a lot of them, you know, local issues, hopefully they'll be better understand what, you know, what is really happening on the ground, and hopefully it can be concluded satisfactory for everyone involved, that nobody's trying to railroad something down one way or another, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about the community. And to say, you know, what you're saying about, you know, the looking at the social and economic, you know, that all does. That's why I said, Alistair, like, it all comes under the umbrella of community planning, social, economic, and within corporate plans, within the new councils. That's, to me, this is all starting to look, and councils will be looking for all socially, economic, and every for each area, because it all has to feed into the bigger picture as well.
Thank you very much, Chair.
My apologies of a sore throat today. You said is the issue about disparity of funding in the West Province. I'd been approached by some councillors in Londonderry and Strabane because they felt they were particularly affected, but there seemed to be a concern that it was a DFP issue rather than a DOE issue. And I had facilitated a meeting with the Finance Minister. Was there any feedback there in terms of the clarity that whatever the issue was, it was primarily a DOE function rather than DFP?
Chair, through you, I know that at the recent political partnership panel meeting, the representative from Derry City Council had an opportunity to address those issues face-to-face with the Finance Minister, and I believe that there was some resolution achieved as a result of that. As to the detail of that, I would need to go back and check and come back to you on the information.
Right. That's okay. Okay.
No other members have indicated any desire to ask questions, so just thank Karen Dermot. Thanks very much for your presentation. And Karen, you did say you will get back to the committee with the issue around the social need.
Yes, absolutely, and also I will get back to Mr Campbell's issue about Derry City Council as well.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is Universal Credit Payment Flexibility Scheme. It's a briefing by the Social Security Agency. I would just wish to advise the committee that on Friday officials were informed that the briefing scheduled for today on the disability protection and discretionary support schemes would have to be postponed. Schemes are still in the course of being developed. I would also draw members' attention to correspondence on page 24, the pact from the Department regarding universal credit, surpluses and self-employed losses, digital service, amendment regulations. The Department has advised that these regulations will not be implemented here. Universal credit will not be introduced until 2016. And just to advise the committee, the following officials are here: Brian Doherty, Social Security Agency, and Sinead Crossan. And I would refer members to page 26 of your meeting packs. So I'd welcome Brian and Sinead here to the committee and ask you to give your briefing, and then we in the meeting take questions.
Good morning, Mr Chairman, and can I thank you and the members for the opportunity to attend the committee today to brief you on the Universal Credit Payment Flexibility Scheme designed by the Department. I also hope you find the briefing note we provided useful. I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Sinead Crossan, who is the head of the agency's Social Welfare Policy team. As members are aware, Universal Credit will bring together 6 benefits into one. The original design for Universal Credit envisaged a significant change for many claimants from the current payment arrangements for benefits and tax credits. Concerns have been raised from various quarters, including the voluntary and community sector and this committee, about the potential adverse impact on some of the most vulnerable within our society. Particular concern was raised in respect of the regularity with which payments would be made, the issues that could arise by paying housing costs directly to claimants and not landlords, and the fact that the payment would be made to one person in the household. It was in this context that Nelson McCausland, the then Minister for Social Development, engaged with ministers from Great Britain in 2012 to secure enhanced flexibility around the payment of universal credit in Northern Ireland. In developing this payment flexibility scheme, departmental officials looked at a range of published research in addition to listening to views gathered through engagement with the public and the voluntary and community sector, ensuring that the public have been aware of our intentions. The views of this committee, as well as those of the Sub-Executive Committee on Welfare Reform, have also informed the development of the scheme. The Payment Flexibility Scheme for claimants in Northern Ireland will offer a robust level of support, alleviating many of the concerns around the new payment arrangements, while still encouraging claimants to engage responsibly with their own budgeting requirements. Twice-monthly payments will mirror how the majority of working-age Social Security agent claimants are currently being paid, easing concerns raised about a move to monthly payment. The option to choose a monthly payment will still be available to all claimants. The flexibility of being able to split a household payment between a couple will safeguard against scenarios when a single household payment could lead to finances being controlled by one member of the household who does not show responsibility for managing the household budget, in particular adequately providing for the needs of children. Managed payment of the housing element of universal credit to landlords will maintain continuity of payment method for the vast majority of tenants in Northern Ireland, ensuring that claimants remain secure in their tenancies while also providing a firm financial basis for social housing landlords. Having previously consulted with key interest groups on the scheme, including this committee, and having engaged with the Northern Ireland public, it is now the Department's intention to embark on a further period of public consultation following on from the design work that has completed on the scheme. Hope the members find this briefing useful, and along with Sinead, we are happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Brian. Just have a couple of questions in starting. The universal credit was to be rolled out in Britain in February, following a pilot scheme in the northwest of England, I think in Warrington. The reports from that pilot scheme would indicate that the rollout was a bit of a disaster, and that the only people that could actually put on the system were single men, mainly living with their parents. There's approximately 16,500 on when they should have been in the region of 1.5 million. So I think Ian Duncan-Smith has persisted in going ahead with something that really doesn't work. So I'm just wondering, is there any indication from Britain that they're going to have any more success with actually developing an IT system that can deal with universal credit? Because from what we were hearing from Warrington, it could take a fair number of years to actually develop a scheme that could cope. And I also base that on the fact that when I have asked officials who have come up in front of the committee over the last 4 or 5 years, really it's been quite difficult to explain how universal credit will actually work. And, you know, putting the 6 benefits into one, which on the face of it seems a very good idea, but in practice doesn't seem to work.
Well, I think there has been much commentary and there have been a number of reports, Mr Chair, with regard to universal credit and its rollout within Great Britain. What I can say is that the most recent public announcement by DWP on the further rollout of universal credit indicated that there would be all offices within the Job Centre Plus network, of which there are 700, would actually start delivering universal credit during 2015. And they anticipate that by the end of this year, over 400,000 people will actually be in receipt of universal credit. They've also indicated a schedule which would see the further rollout of what's called digital service, which will be for all claimant groups. That is due to commence in May 2016 and will roll out for a period through to the end of December 2017. What is called transition, which is in essence is new applicants. With regard to managing the migration for those who have not naturally come on to universal credit, that will then happen over a subsequent 2 years. I suppose it would be inappropriate maybe for me to comment on what I would say is the success or otherwise, but we've been to DWP, we have seen how the system works in operation currently. Indeed, our Minister visited DWP only 2 or 3 weeks ago, where he had the opportunity to see the system actually in action. Which I think we find very helpful and informative. And currently in an office called Sutton in London, DWP are trialling the digital service across all claimant groups. So that would extend beyond single individuals and would include families, couples with children, those with an illness and a disability. And that is testing the digital services as it has been built, and that's the service that we ultimately will get. Although again, as I say, that according to the current plans wouldn't be available until May 2016.
I think certainly the feedback that when I've been in touch with civil servants at DWP seem to be quite unhappy with the system. The ministers are playing ahead, as you might expect them to, and it's not that long ago that David Cameron seemed to be expressing grave doubts about the success or otherwise that might emanate from the implementation of universal credit. Just in terms of the numbers that you talked about, you were talking about 400,000 by the end of 2015, when logically you would expect to have a couple of million at least. It just seems to me that what has happened is they've introduced a system without actually having the IT system in place, because presumably if you've only 400,000 on, you're going to end up with two systems. You're going to have the old system, which is still dealing with the people who aren't on universal credit, and then you're going to have this new digital system, which presumably is going to roll out over, I think, a period of 2 years. So, I mean, how does that make it easier in terms of the payment of benefits to those?
Well, I suppose historically, and you're absolutely right, DWP have actually developed systems, had them, complete.
I'm just thinking of the previous, when they went in 1993, when the department went live, everything was in place. So on one particular day, everybody changed over. Obviously, there were transitions, because years ago they used to do the regs, and then they had the anomalies, and all of that was dealt with before the introduction. What seems to have happened with universal credit, the cart was put before the horse. The system wasn't in place, but the benefits are sort of now in the process of being paid to some people, but not to others under the new system.
Well, the approach that DWP are taking with regard to IT development is called an agile approach, and you're absolutely right, there are going to be two systems that will be running in parallel. The live service, in essence, is what I would call as a test and development system. So as they rolled it out into the northwest of England with a small group of a particular claimant group, which was, by and large, single under 25-year-olds who had no families and no housing costs. And that allowed them to start to develop the system and test it in terms of getting to a point where it will be a scalable system, and that's the system that they would then use in 2016 by 2016. What they've been able to do then through Sutton is that they have built elements of the digital service, and they're starting to test that. And whilst we haven't seen any public information yet in terms of how that is operating, but I get a sense from some of the colleagues that I've been speaking to over in DWP that they're pleased with the progress that they've been making to date. And yes, there will be 400,000 people come the end of this year who will be sitting in what's known as live service, and there is a plan that is being developed to then move them across onto digital service. The digital service, as I say, will be available from May next year, which is probably the earliest date that we could take universal credit, because we've said that we would only take a system that is sort of fully functional and scalable.
The likely that those 400,000 may just be single people again. They're the easiest to put on to any system.
The vast majority of those will be singles, but as they roll it out across the 700 offices, they will be taking other claimant groups, because within those singles, people have maybe then had partners, they have had children, and they've had to be accommodated within the system.
So that's when the system will actually be put to the test?
The digital service in May 16 will be the scalable system, yeah.
We have an expectation. Gregory?
It's quite useful. The examples here, see on page 35, 36, 32. If I could concentrate on 35,
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we're maybe working with different
right, this is universal credit assessment. A family with 2 children, both of them unemployed.
Example, yeah.
Got that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Just the figure there is adjusted universal credit payment of almost £1,400 per month, and then there's the flexibility. Just to confirm, if that were a similar picture in GB, they wouldn't have the flexibility to split payments, isn't that right?
Well, the system, the universal credit system...
The default system.
Well, the universal credit system within GB, the default system, universal credit system within GB is that you will get paid on a monthly basis, a calendar monthly basis. But the facility is within the universal credit system for split payments, but it is not the default position. You would have to request it, and you would have to have special circumstances in which that would be approved.
Yeah. But that's not required here?
It's not required here, no.
Right. Just to, well, if I could ask one question before I come to that. The IT system that the Vice Chair alluded to, whatever problems there are there have no impact whatever, isn't that right, on the block grant that we operate under?
No.
In terms of financial situations, if there's an ongoing problem with the IT system at DWP, as far as you're concerned?
Well, I suppose it would be fair to say, and I use this term, this is my term, DWP are taking all of the pain in terms of developing the system. We will be contributing an apportionment of the costs, and there will be some changes specific to Northern Ireland, but development costs have historically been borne by DWP as they develop the system. There will be some costs we will incur because of our own changes, of which those under the flexibilities, the 3 flexibilities, are some of those changes.
Yeah, but assuming it works out okay, and there's a benefit accrued from the new IT system, then we get the benefit without the pain.
We do.
If there's a pain in terms of additional costs to resolving problems, it's not applicable to Social Security Northern Ireland. Is that right?
Unless those are specific to Northern Ireland issues, and we have asked for some changes.
Right. But if they're generic problems,
If they're generic problems and DWP are experiencing, they would pick up the cost.
right. Okay, that's fair enough. Right, on that example 1, I know it's difficult to get an average potential family, but you know, a family that are both unemployed and have 2 children is reasonable stab at getting an average family here. How will that universal credit assessment differ from what people in those exact same circumstances would be on now?
In terms of how much they would get paid?
Yes, their financial difference.
I wouldn't have that information, I'm sorry, to hand. This is a calculation based on the current benefits, which are actually determined by Treasury.
Yeah.
So they are. So how that would compare to somebody here in Northern, I'm not too sure. However, within universal credit, nobody will be any worse off due to the transitional protection until they have a significant change of circumstances. So if this was different from a similar circumstance person in Northern Ireland and it was less than what they're currently getting, the transitional protection would protect them.
Right.
They won't be any worse off.
So they wouldn't be any worse off, right?
Until there's a significant change in circumstance.
Yes, yeah, that's why I said about circumstances being the same. Okay, so just to get to the bottom line then in terms of the amount, it's effectively £1,400, less £400 for the housing element paid to the landlord. Do you have an idea of what the comparable amount would be if there were a working family with 2 children who would have to earn to get the same as that? In other words, if someone was earning a gross salary of what, 16,000, 17,000, would that equate to what that is?
Unfortunately, you probably have to ask an accountant in terms of, because there's a...
Just on that point, it's likely that particular family, because they cut off, I think it's 26,000 for working tax credit with children, and then they factor in the number of children with child tax credit. So a family of that dimension would probably still be in some form of benefit in terms of working tax credit, and that obviously depends on what they were earning.
Yeah, no, but that's not what I mean, Chair. What I meant was...
I think what you, if I could maybe preempt, I think the point you're making is that somebody working may not be as well, or maybe just equally as well off or badly off or whatever. I think maybe it would...
No, what I was trying to get at was a working couple, well, there's 1 or 2 of them working, how much would they have to earn in terms of a gross income to be no worse off than this couple?
Well, between them, 26,000 for a couple is the working. If they earn more than that, they maybe not get working tax credit. If they earn below that jointly, they would be able to claim working tax credit. They have to be working for at least 21 or the other, for at least 24 hours a week.
Yeah, I understand that, Chairman, but it's a point of how much would a working couple with 2 children in the exact same circumstances as these people have to earn to be in the same net position as this couple, if they were working?
You mean what would be the equivalent gross salary that would give
Yes.
them to take?
Yeah.
I don't know, but we could check and come
That's
back
okay.
to the committee with what that would
That's
be.
fine.
Well, it was interesting, the Lord Freud had said in the House of Lords a couple of years ago that if the benefit cap 26,000, the gross would be 35,000, implying that somebody who was working to get the equivalent would have to earn 35,000.
Yeah.
So that's the way they Mr. Allister.
Couple of points. The adjustments for payment in Northern Ireland fortnightly payment, etc. Is that costing us anything?
It will cost us. We have been given an early indicative figure for a number of IT changes. We have asked DWP to consider 37 IT changes, and by way of example, we for instance, here in Northern Ireland will have different bank holidays. We would have 12th of July, St Patrick's Day.
But we've always had those.
We do, but there is a cost that has to be incurred. So,
Are we already incurring a cost on those?
if we, well, on the running of the system, it would be set. It would have been set at the very beginning of the systems that we currently have, what I would call the legacy systems. But we have asked DWP to consider 37 particular IT changes, of which these 3 are of those within that 37. And an early indicative figure they've given to us that it would cost around about £3 million to make these changes.
Is that a one-off, 3 million?
It's a one-off payment.
And are we now going to pay for differences which have always existed that we hitherto weren't paying for?
Well, the difference here is that the 3 flexibilities that we have are not the default situation within GB. So the system has been set up that when you would go into universal credit, you would get paid, for instance, on a monthly basis, that your payment with regard to your housing costs would go to you as an individual, and that you would not have a split payment unless request. There would be one person named in a household. So as you go into the system, that's automatically what it does. The IT guys then have to make changes specific to the Northern Ireland postcodes, whereby when you go in, it recognises our postcodes, and it will then default to the position that we have here for Northern Ireland.
That's in respect of those 3 novel changes?
Yes.
There are 34 historic differences?
Well, it's not just, there are, some of them are historic and some of them are new because of universal credit. So for instance, in GB, you would also have council tax, which we have as rates rebate. So when you go into the system, and if you were reading it online, which is where the system will be, you would see council tax, and that wouldn't mean anything to us. So it will get changed to rates rebate. So there's terminology changes that have to be made. I don't have the list with me. I'm happy to share that list if anybody would like to see it. But there are a range of what we would call historical changes and some specific to universal credit.
But the bottom line is a one-off cost of 3 million.
Well, that's the cost, the indicative cost they've given to us. That's subject to further discussion with DWP.
Yes. Now, it's slightly outside your remit this morning, but the changes that were talked about under the Stormont House Agreement, were they going to bring extra IT costs?
Well, I think, Mr Chair, given that the Stormont House Agreement and the Welfare Reform Bill is subject to some ongoing discussion, it probably would be inappropriate for me to comment on those at the moment.
Well, just generally, was that going to bring extra IT costs? If the Stormont House Agreement had proceeded on the basis that everyone signed up to it all, would it have brought extra IT costs?
Well, again, Mr Chair, I prefer to default and say that until the Stormont House Agreement is finalised and until the politicians, I think, have made an agreement on it.
My question is, if we hadn't had the interesting events of this week, would where we were have resulted in additional IT costs? Now, surely you can tell us yes or no.
Well, I think without getting into the detail, my understanding of the discussions, both from Stormont House Agreement, it is more around finance rather than IT changes, so I wouldn't envisage there being.
So is that a no?
I wouldn't envisage there being any further IT costs.
That wasn't that difficult, Mr. Doherty, was it? So I'm to take away the understanding that the Stormont House Agreement wouldn't have resulted in any IT changes, any IT costs?
Not within the DWP system that I'm aware of.
So just taking us back a short time, there was much talk for a long time about £1 billion of extra IT costs. Has that all melted away?
Well, the £1 billion that is actually the cost for running the current systems, the current legacy systems, and that continues to be the cost today. And Northern Ireland makes a contribution to those particular costs.
But the presentation was that without welfare reform, there was going to be the requirement for a new NI Pacific IT scheme costing £1 billion. Is that right?
Well, I think that the information that has been provided in terms of what we do within DSD is that the current benefit systems cost around about £1 billion to operate throughout the UK. It's the current legacy systems. Northern Ireland makes a
The IT schemes?
the IT systems.
What's that?
And the contribution that Northern Ireland makes is around about £15 million per year towards the running of those IT systems.
How much do we make a year?
Our contribution is around 15 million.
Yes. Yes. But if welfare reform does not proceed in Northern Ireland in view of what's happened this week, are we back to the business of requiring our own IT system?
Well, I think I wouldn't like to comment on where we are with the current situation with regard to welfare reform, and I'd prefer just to maybe leave that and allow the politicians to continue.
Well, just on that point, I mean, I asked some of the officials from DSD who were up a couple of weeks ago about if the proposed agreement had gone ahead, could they bolt on to the IT system whatever changes or anomalies may result in that, and they said that was possible because the £1 billion figure, there's been all sorts of figures bandied about going back 2 or 3 years, so it just seems that a lot of that was not necessarily the case.
Well, the £1 billion is the figure that was provided to us by colleagues in the Department for Work and Pensions.
But that's the system that's already there.
That is to run the current legacy systems, yes.
But
Which if we didn't implement welfare reform, we would have to replicate of our own.
We would have to replicate if we didn't, or we would have to take over those systems and run them ourselves.
They're already in place.
Yeah.
They are, well, they currently
With the running
operate.
cost of £1 billion a year, is it a running cost of
That is a running cost,
£1 billion a year?
for an IT system?
yes.
But that's an IT system for the whole of the United Kingdom.
It is operated across all of the
Yes.
UK.
An IT system for Northern Ireland would be a much reduced arrangement, would it not?
Well, the system is the system, and our apportionment has been agreed some time back in terms of the percentage. But we would have to operate it for all of our benefits. So we would still need all of the functionality that the system has, and any of the costs associated with maintaining that would undoubtedly fall to Northern Ireland. And I think that irrespective of the number of claimants that we would have operating on that system, you still have to operate it.
And the operational costs are £1 billion?
Around about just shy of £1 billion a year, yes.
Is that because it's franchised out to the private sector? Or?
Well, the system actually is owned by the private sector. It was developed on behalf of government, and they continue to operate it. So big companies like HPES, who are one of the operators of it, they maintain it for the Department for Work and Pensions.
Well, the system that developed in 1993 was the biggest computerisation since the NASA space program, and I think then they went something like £55 to £60 million over budget. That's what, 22 years ago, so it's expensive. But I mean, when I spoke to the officials a couple of weeks ago and I asked them the question, they seemed to think that it was relatively straightforward if you had anomalies or changes within the system here to bolt that on to the existing system, because obviously when you talk about split payments, there is that that is in the system in Britain. It's not the default system necessarily, but if people applied, for instance, if there was a gambling problem or something like that in a household, then one or other partner could apply to have it paid fortnightly. So that's actually built into the system there. So presumably it's not, you don't have to go through a whole rigmarole to get that onto it. It's a new system, it's already there, it's just a matter of presumably.
I think it would be fair to say, Mr. Chairman, that the current systems are old. As you say, they extend back to 1993. I'm assuming that's right. I honestly do not know. Their cost for maintaining them has been growing over the years. The intention currently is that within the Department for Work and Pensions, they will start to close down those systems. And you then also have to bring into the IT system that is used by HMRC to run tax credits, which is currently not something that we incur. The intention within HMRC is that they would see that close in all likelihood some stage shortly after the end of 2017.
But if a person were cynical, they might suggest that because it's in the private sector, that may be the reason why it seems to be so expensive. Of course, I wouldn't suggest that for a moment, but if it was in-house, it might be a lot less expensive. Because
It might be more expensive.
well, you would have to presume that if it's in the realms of the private sector, then profit has to be made somewhere along the line by the private sector. Otherwise, presumably, they're not doing it out of some altruistic desire to help the Department of Works and Pensions. Right, next, Roy.
Well, just picking up on your comments there, I am aware that not all public sector computer systems have a good record, so we need to be careful there as well. There's a bit of chat there about some of the changes that have been built in, and the split payment system was mentioned there. Can you give a little bit more clarity of how the split payment system will operate? Because there could be one of a partner who has an addiction issue, and whether it's the male or the female, one or the other may be the more responsible person to take the majority of payments for house to ensure that children not suffer. So how are you going to operate this split payment system in practice?
The more responsible person is the one most likely to make the request for the split payment. So the split payment request is made, and then it's calculated based on the elements that would belong to each of the individuals. But if there is a case perhaps where a person with the addiction makes the request for the split payment and requests that the money is provided to them, the department would meet with both members of the couple to decide which is the person who is caring for the children, which one is the most responsible, and then make a decision based on that.
Okay. And I think just go back to the computer system that we were talking about there, where we were told indicative cost is about 3 million. Is that for all the Northern Ireland changes that had been talked about up until this recent times? Just 3 million?
That's for all of the Northern Ireland changes.
Okay. I take it I'd be right in saying that many of those changes have been built in some time ago. There's been discussions some time ago, right from the start. Split payments has been an option built into the system, so you weren't having to develop some new concept within the system and develop procedures to deal with it and how it would all interlink. Would I be right in saying that if you late on decide in making extensive changes, there are huge risks involved in technically being able to deliver it, and that we would be wise to be at least aware of those factors?
Well, the actual test and development of the Northern Ireland changes hasn't started yet. We don't anticipate those actually starting until early in 2016. DWP are scoping out what the level of work and the resources that they would require by way of IT experts would be to start to test and develop those. DWP are very focused, understandably, on ensuring that their digital service is built to a point that it is both robust and scalable to allow it to launch in May. So between now, I suppose, and the end of this year, if there were any changes, we would have an opportunity to put those forward. But we've been through a fairly extensive, survey across within our own department, within the agency, in terms of what those changes would be to allow us to operate universal credit within Northern Ireland. And at this stage, we haven't had any further requests from either within the department or from any of our partner organisations to make additional changes.
You've had discussions about the huge running costs of the current system, which has been one of the biggest IT projects in the UK. Yet it's ageing and its running costs are becoming exorbitant. And if we wish to continue to operate in the current system, there will be huge costs involved. Just going back to if we are not buying into the new system, how will our benefits be paid?
With great difficulty, I would have to say, or it would have to be done clerically, if it transpired that the system was unable to function. And we would have to bear the cost of any changes that there would be to the current system if we continue to maintain the legacy system. But at some stage they will either fall over because of their age, and as I say, that the advice that we've been getting from colleagues in DWP is that they plan to close those systems down probably over the next 2 to 3, maybe 4 years.
Bearing that in mind, do we all not to be very careful that as we suggest amendments or changes that it will be technically doable? But that it will be possible to deliver it within the necessary time frame? Because if we suggest something that technically the engineers, the computer experts do not have time to deliver or may not be technically capable of delivering without extensive costs. Where I'm coming from is I would have thought we need to be careful to make sure any proposal that any of us bring forward is deliverable by the system and in the time frame that we're talking about it, but even just technically deliverable and without incurring exorbitant costs.
And that is what we've positioned with DWP. The 37 IT changes, they have already looked at them and they have advised us in terms of the difficulty to have them done, and they've given us a high level cost. They haven't broken it down into the individual 37.
And just to be clear, how long have you been talking to DWP about some of these changes? So, presumably this hasn't just happened last week or...
Well, some of the flexibilities that the Minister secured, for instance, these flexibilities, which go back over probably the last 18 months, we've been in discussion with DWP at a very high level to advise them that these were coming. But I would have to say, as has already been noted, there are changes that we currently have in the system that DWP would have been aware of. And that we would have asked of, for instance, the difference in the bank holidays being one of them, because that's currently built into the system. Also, some of the changes in the terminology that we use within Northern Ireland, again, as I've mentioned, things like rate rebate in comparison to council tax, or as they use in GB, local authorities, against what we use here as being councils, just to make sure that the Northern Ireland customers are very familiar with it.
Okay, thank you.
Just before I take Stuart in, I mean, in terms of the system that operates at the moment, and the run out of universal credit, that hasn't been particularly successful. In the pilot scheme in Warrington, I think they had a write-off something like 42 million in the development of the IT system. Overall, DWP have written off something in the region of 500 million so far, and those are figures coming from DWP. So it's an extremely complex and difficult system to develop anyhow. So, when we talk about what it may or may not cost, the system that they're developing, and we've been told by people who actually were involved in the pilot scheme, it could take between 8 and 10 years to actually develop a system that can deal with universal credit. So,
I'm aware of the reports with regard to the write-off cost, but I think, as I said earlier on, Mr. Chair, that the cost has been borne by DWP.
Yeah.
Also, development costs are being borne by DWP.
They're not just having the pain, they're almost comatose as far as the pilot system is concerned. Stuart?
Thank you, Chair. I guess sort of the last refuge of those of us who wish to resist universal credit is to blame the IT system and the costs. In November 2014, the Department published a Universal Credit Information booklet with very helpful statistics from NISR in that. And in that it says that there will be approximately 102,000 people who will be £38 per week better off as a result of the introduction of universal credit. How can we get that money to those people? Because what we've been hearing recently is about all the people who will lose out money, and that's important, and we need to deal with that. But the other side of this coin is there are an awful lot of people who are going to benefit from the changes. So what are you doing to ensure that we do move forward to get to that point?
Well, I think as a first step, we need the legislation in place that would allow us to sort of progress.
And that legislation would allow, in this instance of universal credit, some 102,000 households in Northern Ireland to be better off by the sum of £38.
Well, with the introduction of universal credit, yes, that's what the statisticians are advising.
Yes. And lots of other good news in that in terms of the issues that Mr. Campbell was making reference to in terms of those who are currently earning at the moment, and at the moment the system disadvantages them, but universal credit will advantage them. And you've lots of statistics in there as well.
Yes, so the amount of money that people currently lose in terms of their benefit being reduced will lessen. It will reduce to, they will lose 65 pence for every pound that they gain in terms of employment. And that's what we refer to as this taper, where that your benefit goes down proportionately at 65 pence in the pound as your income, your household income, goes up. That's very different from where it is now, which is just over 80 pence.
Yes. So there are substantial benefits to people that are currently being held back, not just as a result of the failure of the legislation, but even if the legislation was passed, because of the other complexities of introducing universal credit. Even though it has great benefit to people in Northern Ireland, it will take us quite some time to get to that point of delivery. If you had the legislation tomorrow, when could you deliver that £38 to those 102,000 people in Northern Ireland?
Well, the earliest that we can take the digital service is when it's introduced in GB, which is May 2016.
So currently, it would be May 2016 before we can actually deliver another £38 per household for those 102,000 people that will benefit from these changes.
On universal credits, yes.
On universal credit. That's very helpful. Thanks very much. Because, Chair, there is a raft of other figures as well contained in this report which sets out the benefits to others. And, of course, it also says that those that will be losing out will be protected by transitional arrangements already agreed prior to any other agreements that have been made in the last few weeks and months. Thank you.
Well, I think there's something like 97,000 would lose and 92,000 would stay the same, so I suppose it balances out. Just one question I have, I don't think any other members have indicated.
102,000 and 97,000 will either remain the same or better off.
Sorry, 97,000 would be worse off, I think that's the figure I quoted. Just all of this system, talking about it forever,
Yeah, £38.
is predicated on people having bank
Yes.
accounts. And you had mentioned earlier, you know, that
The economy.
some payments haven't to be done clerkly. If someone doesn't have a bank account, how do they get paid under the current system indeed and the system that may well or may not be introduced?
Well, currently we have actually a range of financial products through which people are paid. It's been some time now since actually the Social Security Agency paid anybody by cheque. So we have everything from people getting money paid into their bank account, we have them paid into post office card accounts, and we have other special payment arrangements for individuals, and they will continue into the future. And it's very much the choice of individuals into which those bank accounts are paid. Sinead and her team are also taking forward some work with credit unions to try and encourage more people to use credit unions, and also for the credit unions to offer more financial products, shall we say, which would allow benefits to be paid directly into credit unions, and also allow them to set up things like direct debits and standing orders. So we very much recognise the importance of continuing to support people to have their money paid into an account which suits their particular needs.
There are some people maybe who don't have documentation, you know, to open a bank account. I'm just wondering what happens to those people.
Well, we would probably put them onto the special account that we have for them, which is a very limited account in terms of money goes in and money goes out. It's a very basic account, but we have no provision within which to make a payment to an individual either by cheque or in cash.
That's fine, thank you. Bye.
Just quickly go back on something that was mentioned earlier, changes in terms of tax credit, which is obviously coming in along the line as well. And if we haven't bought into a new system, if we haven't bought into a new system, how are we to support those families who have been heavily reliant on tax credits if that comes to an end?
I think that would be an extraordinarily difficult challenge for us, when we would probably have to go into negotiations with HMRC with regard to seeing whether we could continue that system. Although, as I said earlier, the intention is that that system will start to close down from the end of 2017. We have had no engagement with them, per se, around what it would cost for us to start to run that system, which would be in addition to those that DWP has. But I should point out that the closure of the tax credit system, the closure down of the legacy systems will bring financial benefits and savings to UK government. Benefits will continue to be paid, but the systems that they're going to have are obviously, if you're currently paying 6 benefits across what in essence is 3 different systems. The social security benefit systems are our own legacy systems. Housing benefit paid through a system which the Northern Ireland Housing Executive administer, and tax credits through HMRC. And you put that into one system, there are benefits to be gained in terms of efficiency and cost.
No, it's just, I think it's an important element because there hasn't been much thought about tax credits going, and how are many of the families who may be working and reliant on tax credits, what's all of this, how is this going to affect them?
Mr. Allister?
I just want to go back to Stuart's point. So the 102,000 families who would be £38 a week better off under universal credit, if welfare reform doesn't go through, obviously, they don't get that benefit. That equates to just under £4 million a week coming into the Northern Ireland economy. £200 million a year. And none of that at any cost to the block grant, is that correct?
Well, the business case that has gone through a number of iterations within Northern Ireland is likely to generate some savings by way of annual managed expenditure, and that will go back into Treasury.
Yes, but the payment of extra benefits under universal credit isn't something that has to be taken away from the block grant. It comes as direct welfare payments.
Oh, yes.
Whereas the Stormont House Agreement, extra payments have to come out of the block grant. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And the extra money that would come in to Northern Ireland's economy through universal credit would be £200 million a year.
Well,
And the Stormont House Agreement is going to cost, out of the block grant, 94 and rising £million a year.
I should point out that the increase to £38 per week is really a mix of between your benefit and anything that you would get by way of employment, because of the way in which the taper
Yes, but
works.
it's money into the economy.
It would be money into the economy, yes,
And at no cost to the block grant.
at no cost to the block grant.
Thank you.
Yeah, no other members have indicated. So, Brian and Sinead, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next items on the agenda are proposed subordinate legislation. I would refer members to page 42 of their packs. First is an SL1, Social Security and Members of the Reserve Forces, Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. The Department proposed to make a statutory rule which will allow claimants or their partners in receipt of GSA, AS, or the partner of a claimant in receipt of ESA to attend the mandatory 15-day annual training camp without losing entitlement. The rule will be subject to the confirmatory resolution procedure before the Assembly and will come into operation on the 6th of April 2015. I would ask the committee if it content the rule to be made.
Great.
Content.
Thank you. Next is I would refer members to page 50 of your packs. It's the Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. The Department proposes to make a statutory rule which amends the Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Regulations to amend the eligibility criteria for winter fuel payments made outside the United Kingdom and Switzerland and EEA countries. The rule will be subject to a negative resolution procedure before the Assembly and will come into operation on the 21st of September 2015. I would ask the committee if you're content for the rule to be made.
Content.
Thank you. I next refer members to page 58 of your packs, and it's the Social Security Miscellaneous Amendments Number 2 Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. The Department proposes to make a statutory rule which makes minor amendments to a range of income-related benefits. The rule will be subject to a negative resolution procedure before the Assembly and will come into operation on the 6th of April 2015. I would ask the committee if you're content for the rule to be made. Thank you. I now refer members to page 65 of your packs, the Social Security Claims and Payments Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. I would ask if members have any objections to the rule, and if there are no objections, I'd read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 109/2015, Social Security Claims and Payments Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objections to the rule. Are members content? Thank you.
Great.
I would next refer members to page 72 of your packs, the Social Security Revaluation of Earnings Factors Order, Northern Ireland 2015. Again, I would ask if members have any objections to the rule, and if there are no objections, I'll read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 111 2015, the Social Security Revaluation of Earnings Factors Order, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to exam of statutory rules report, has no objections to the rule.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Next, I would refer members to page 82 of your packs. It's a Social Security Pensions Low Earnings Threshold Order, Northern Ireland 2015. If members have no objections to the rule, I'll read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 112/2015 Social Security Pensions Low Earnings Threshold Order, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to exam of statutory rules report, has no objections to the rule.
Great.
Thank you. Next, I refer members to page 90 of your packs. The Social Security Pensions Flat Rate Accrual Amount Order, Northern Ireland 2015. And ask if members have any objections to the rule. If there are no objections, I'll read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 114/2015 Social Security Pensions Flat Rate Accrual Amount Order, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to exam of statutory rules report, has no objection.
Great.
Great.
Thank you. Next, refer members to page 98 of your packs. It's the SR 115/2015, the Occupational Pension Scheme Levies Amendment Regulations, NI 2015. Members have no objections to the rule. I'll read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 115/2015, the Occupational Pension Schemes Levies Amendment Regulations, NI 2015, and subject to the examiner of statutory rules report, has no objections to the rule. Thank you. Next, I would refer members to page 107 of your packs. It's SR 116/2015, the Child Support Miscellaneous and Consequential Amendments Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. And if there are no objections to the rule, I'll read the following into the record. The Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 116/2015, the Child Support Miscellaneous and Consequential Amendments Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015, subject to exam of statutory rules report, with no objections to the rule. Thank you. I then refer members to page 120 of your packs. It's SR 117/2015, the Guaranteed Minimum Pensions Increase Order, Northern Ireland 2015. If members have no objections, I'll read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 117/2015, the Guaranteed Minimum Pensions Increase Order, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to exam of statutory rules report, has no objections to the rule.
Great.
Thank you. Next, refer members to page 128 of your packs. SR 119/2015, the Automatic Enrolment, Earnings Trigger and Qualifying Earnings Band Order, Northern Ireland 2015. If members have no objections to the rule, I'll read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule 119/2015, the Automatic Enrolment, Earnings Trigger and Qualifying Earnings Band Order, Northern Ireland 2015, subject to the examiner of statutory rules report, has no objections to the rule. Thank you. Refer members next to page 136 of your packs. It's SR 124/2015, the Social Security Benefits Operating Order, Northern Ireland 2015. If members have no objections to the rule, I'll read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule 124/2015, Social Security Benefits Operating Order, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the examiner of statutory rules report, recommends that it be confirmed by the Assembly. Thank you. Next, I would refer members to page 186 of your packs. SR 138/2015, the Job Seekers Alliance Extended Periods of Sickness Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. If there are no objections, I'll read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule 138/2015, the Job Seekers Alliance Extended Periods of Sickness Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the examiner of statutory rules report, recommends that it be confirmed by the Assembly. Thank you. Next, refer members to page 200 of your packs. SR 139/2015, the Social Security Benefits Operating Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. If there are no objections to the rule, I'll read the following into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the Statute Rule SR 139/2015, the Social Security Benefits Operating Regulations Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner of Statute Rules report, has no objections to the rule. So thank you for that, members. Moving on to correspondence, just ask you to note that on page 214 of members' meeting packs, the Department has written to notify the Committee of amendments that are to be tabled at the consideration stage of the Pensions Bill. Consideration stage is scheduled for the 24th of March. And if members, I'll ask members if you're content to action the rest of the correspondence as outlined in the correspondence memo.
Great.
Are members content? Thank you. Next is the forward work programme on page 360 of your packs. Ask members if you're content with the forward work programme as drafted.
Great.
Members are agreed. We proceed. Thank you. I would ask members if there's any other business. So if members are content to move into closed sessions to consider the second draft of phase 3 report, I would seek agreement before proceeding. So we move into